Welcome to Bon Appetit, the show where we teach you about bones. I'm Joint Rick Liu.
And I'm student Dr. El Sinovio.
And today we're going to teach you about joints.
Joints are the union of two or more bones.
Woo!
Bones are very important to the human body. They exhibit a variety of form and function.
There are three classifications of joints. There's fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. The first one we'll talk about is fibrous.
Fibrous joints are united by connective tissue. An example of a fibrous joint is the syndesmosis between the radius and the ulna. Another example of a fibrous joint are the sutures of the skull. As you can see, these joints are relatively immobile, and any movement depends on the length of the connective tissue between the articulating bones.
Cartilaginous joints are formed by hyaline or fibrous cartilage. They are strong, slightly movable joints that include the joints between the vertebral bodies that allow me to do my sick dance moves.
Next is the synovial joint. Synovial joints are the most common type of joint in the body, and they permit the greatest amount of movement. They have a very complex structure. What's that?
Boring lecture time!
The surfaces where the joint meets to form the synovial joint is covered with a thin layer of articular cartilage and separated by a space called the joint cavity. The articular capsule surrounds the joint with an outer fibrous portion consisting of collagen and an inner membrane called the synovial membrane. The fibrous part of the capsule is reinforced by both extrinsic and intrinsic ligaments, which are located outside and within the capsule, respectively. The synovial membrane is a specialized connective tissue that lines the inner surface of the joint capsule, except for articular surfaces. The membrane, also referred to as a synovium, produces and secretes a lubricating and nourishing fluid, appropriately called the synovial fluid. It's done, wake up!
Student loans! Let's get back to work.
There are different types of synovial joints that permit different types of movement. First, we'll look at the hinge joints.
Hinge joints permit movement in one plane and one axis. For example, the elbow joint in flexion and extension. Any of you ladies like this? Call me. My number is down there.
Next are plane joints. Plane joints are small joints which permit limited sliding and gliding movements. An example of plane joints are the carpometacarpal joints in the wrist.
And next we have condyloid joints. These joints permit movements at right angles from each other. This allows for extension, flexion, abduction, adduction, and circumduction. An example of this is the temporomandibular joint, aka the jaw joint.
Next, we have pivot joints.
Pivot sound, pivot sound, pivot.
Pivot joints permit rotation of a bony process around one axis within a connective tissue sleeve or ring. For example, the atlantoaxial joint.
Pivot sound.
And next we got condyloid joints. These joints are saddle-shaped articulations that allow movement in two planes. An example of this is the carpometacarpal joint of the thumb. Finishing move.
And finally, we have ball and socket joints. Ball and socket joints are multi-axial joints. They move in multiple axes and in multiple planes. The spherical or ball-shaped surface of one bone moves within the socket of another. The movements permitted are flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, medial and lateral rotation, as well as circumduction. An example of these kinds of joints are the hip joints or the shoulder joints.
Well, that concludes it for today's show.
Bon appetit!
I hope you learned a lot about joints.
And I hope you found this humorous.
And before we leave, for all you ladies out there, I hope you didn't fall head over heels for me.